Time to do some cleaning up on the old submarine Jeep. This thing's been looking pretty rough since our last few adventures. I covered that in a previous video. Most notably, the sides on this thing were absolutely destroyed. So what we did was simply just bent back the sheet metal on the bottom of the Jeep right here. It definitely took off quite a bit. Basically, where the floor is on the Jeep, all that sheet metal bent right underneath it. So I've got this all bent back in place. Obviously, I am missing this section because the side steps got ripped off of the Jeep. We're going to hide all that with the Big Willy rock sliders. This is probably one of the nicest aftermarket components there are for the Jeeps out there. These things are all laser cut, perfect fit to a standard Jeep body. You can get these in either a welded configuration where it pretty much looks like this, or unwelded configuration. I went with the unwelded setup because my Jeep tub is actually homemade from about here down all the way to the back of the Jeep. I think a guy did that in about the mid 70s, and it looked good enough I just ran with it. So I wanted something that I could put together myself to make sure everything fit just perfectly. I'm glad I did. So if you get the weld it yourself kit, this thing comes in a few different pieces. The first piece is just the essentially angle iron of the main bracket, which you can see there. The second piece is the step, but it does not have the sides on it. This is just a flat piece. So what you do is you take that straight piece, tack weld it here, bend it a little, tack it, tack it, bend, all the way around, weld it, and then you can grind off the edges. So I did that, and then added a few welds to the inside just for strength, and then on the bottom of that little side step is just a little reinforcement bar, which is really nice. Then for strength on the bottom of this thing, there's another piece that welds on that goes all the way across. I still need to tack weld this and cover it up, and then I'm actually going to block off the oval hole, because that oval, obviously I don't have factory drain holes in my Jeep, but the oval is right about here and you can see right through it, which is not good at all. I only have one major complaint with these things, is I don't understand why they have the bolts set up to where you cannot remove them from the rock slider. If you look at this thing, it's stuck in there, so you got to put that bolt in and this bolt in before you even weld it. Obviously that bolt will never come out of here. I can see why they did what they did, because the bolts are kind of up, down, up, down, up, down. I probably would have done it in the center, then made them just a little bit higher. That way you can get them in and out, because as we know in these Jeeps, bolts get rusty, they hit things, threads get gunked up. Just something to look out for. And bam, look at that. The Jeep looks 10 times better than it ever did with the ripped up bottoms on it. Now a lot of people are like, yeah, leave it for the character, but looking at those ugly sides, it just kept me up at night. So those side steps fit just beautifully. What I did to line mine up is I kind of matched the radius of the slider with the radius on the body, because that was the most notable part, and then I could shuffle it back and forth from there. So I actually had to shuffle mine a little bit forward, right up into this section. And then what you'll notice on my Jeep is I've got a lot of body overhang on this back end. And why is that? You know, it's again because these wheel wells are kind of homemade. I measured the dimensions on each side of the Jeep. They're close but not perfectly the same. Then I measured another Jeep I've got, and these are actually about an inch too short. Here's a good look at my wheel well. You look on that side of the Jeep, plenty of good clearance, looks really nice. But if you look on this side of the Jeep, the tire's awfully close to that little section. Most people probably never noticed that in my previous videos, and I left it like that originally because I always thought if I put a different drivetrain in this thing, I might have to slide the axle back an inch, because you can move that backwards about an inch before you run out of frame. Same thing with the shackle back here, you can go back an inch. So that's why I never did it, because if I did slide the axle back and I moved this radius out a little bit, it'd probably look fine with this little section. But now we got the rock sliders on, it's just not cutting it, so we're going to just cut the body. Here's the driver's side of the rock slider. You'll notice the one major problem with these is that they interfere with the shovel and axe brackets. Now, I homemade these myself a long time ago, so they might not look exactly like your Jeep, but they fit the bill. And the problem is the axe is supposed to slide into here, but the slider sticks up. There's a few different ways we can go about this. We can cut the slider down here and maybe push it in, re-weld it, that kind of thing. Not quite sure what I'm going to do yet, but we'll figure it out as we go. Then I put new axe bracket on it. This was the little bottom section that hangs somewhere around here, which I'm going to end up bolting it to the sliders somewhere. And that thing got absolutely destroyed. I hate to say it, but this is like the third one I've destroyed on a Jeep so far. As I cut this section with the grinder, cut it down the middle, pushed it inwards, and then built just a small patch panel that goes on right here. We're going to make two modifications to the rock slider. First is to cover the factory CJ drain hole on the side of it right here. You can see that it is open right underneath where it bolts up to the fender. And the problem is my fenders have been bashed back and forth a few times, so you can see a little bit of a gap through my fender and look right through that hole. So I'm going to just make that nice and flat just to make the Jeep overall look a little bit nicer. Now I just used some scrap steel, cut out an oval shape, and then as you can see, that will fit into the slider like so. Here's my finished patch. You can see right behind the fender where there would be a gaping hole if I didn't put that little plate in there. So that looks really good. And then moving down here, you can see my patch drain plug hole, and that looks good as well. Makes the Jeep look a little bit cleaner. But what I've done is used a grinder to slice my wheel well open, and I cut out probably a 1/2 inch of wheel well right here, and now I've got a little bit to play with, so I'm pushing that back into the rock slider just to make that wheel well look even all the way down, nice and smooth. Hopefully this is enough to not ruin the entire body. We'll just push her down and then tack weld as we go. Here's the finished arching on my wheel wells. It actually turned out pretty good. I was definitely a little worried on how that was going to turn out, but I was able to tack weld it pretty nicely without burning the rest of the paint off the body. So we're just going to sand that all up and paint it good. Here's the only thing I don't like about the paint. For some reason, it leaves a blue streak on the outer radius of the paint. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why. And it's such a stupid problem to have. Overall, I do like having the sliders close to being color matched on the Jeep. Again, just a little bit different because it's satin, but I'd rather the rock sliders blend in with the Jeep rather than sticking out being a powder coated black or texture black, something like that. To me, trying to keep a stockish appearance on the Jeep, I think this was the way to go. Here's my finished product of the driver's side rock slider. Of course, we had some problems. We had to make this indentation for the axe to mount up. I didn't have to make mine go in all the way up against the body because I made these myself. They might be a little bit deeper than a factory World War II Jeep, but something just take note. Because the rock slider is pushing everything outwards, I had to adjust this top nut to make this top section longer than the bottom section. Super simple. Truthfully, my biggest problem with the rock slider was figuring out what in the world to do with this bracket. On a stock Jeep, they mount basically flush to the bottom of the body, and then obviously you can bend this up or down to get the axe in and out of its bracket. Obviously, I could have cut this section out and then moved this thing down where it should be, but the problem with these little brackets is they're junk. I thought, you know what, if we hike it up in the air a little bit, everything will still fit nicely. And then I'm not going to be worried about ripping these off, hopefully. Now on my Jeep, I originally had this bracket a little bit further back, so I had to move it forward to get it centered down in this little slot. And because I'm doing that, I'm going to have to take this and slide it forward as well, probably about 1/2 inch if I had to guess. Check that out. We finally have tools on the side of the Jeep. These things haven't been on there since, it's been since July, August. It's been a while. Forgot how good it looked. I need to give a huge shout out to Sally from Ansel This is a company that manufactures diagnostic tools. So if you go to their website, you're going to see battery testers, check engine light stuff for light duty cars and heavy duty trucks. Just a nice little product line for doing diagnosis. Now, I mentioned in my previous videos that my charging system on the Jeep was just not adequate for all the electrical load that I put on it. So what Sally sent me is a battery diagnostic tool. I mean, how many times have you driven to AutoZone to get your battery tested to see if it's even usable or not? I don't know why. I've never thought about buying one of these tools before. I guess I would just thought that they'd be way too expensive. But these are only about $65 and they sell them on Amazon. Really, really affordable. It's just one of those things that once I have one, I'm never going to live without one. So we're going to test the battery on the submarine here. My Optimum battery has been absolutely tortured over the years, but she's still been kicking pretty good. So we got it hooked up here. Just had to pause the video to find the information about my battery, because to do this test, you need to know how many cold cranking amps it's got, what type of battery is it. Obviously this is a sealed AGM battery, but do you have a lead battery, all that kind of stuff. So what we found here is that my battery's at 95% health, which seems pretty good to me. I mean, if you've been watching my videos, I mean, we just torture this thing with winches and off-roading and running it low, the point that it's dead. I mean, I just abuse the snot out of it. And it's only about 12.52 volts, which is a little low. I probably should have done this test at 12.7 volts. I don't know if it makes a big difference, but nonetheless, 95%, we've got a good battery.